A 17-year-old boy, his jaw aching and his left eye rapidly swelling shut, hunched miserably on the slick, freezing bench of a holding cell. The air was thick with the faint metallic scent of old blood and the aggressive tang of cheap institutional disinfectant. Outside, in the brightly lit squad room, 2 officers chuckled as they finalized their invention. A meticulous, typed fiction detailing charges of resisting arrest and narcotics possession. They didn't even look up when one of them carelessly tossed a cracked cell phone toward the boy's feet. "One call, tough guy," Officer Dugan sneered, the words carrying through the bars. "Go ahead, call your supplier." Leo Harris picked up the device. He pressed the single, memorized speed dial button. The sound of the phone ringing was deafening in the silence of the cell. When the connection clicked and a deep, guarded voice offered a simple, "Hello?" the casual cruelty of the precinct evaporated. The entire axis of political and social power in Beacon Heights, and perhaps the state, suffered a sudden, violent torque, because the man on the other end was not just Leo's father. He was the state attorney general. After 9 o'clock, the atmosphere in Beacon Heights adopted a different, almost synthetic quality. It was a studied, surgical quietude, a silence only punctuated by the hydraulic hiss of concealed automated sprinkler systems nourishing immaculate lawns, or the subdued, distant thrum of high-end European sedans. This was a municipality founded entirely upon the lucrative promise of impenetrable safety and aggressive exclusivity. Against this backdrop of affluent, manufactured perfection, 17-year-old Leo Harris, seated on the cold stone facade outside the expansive public library, appeared noticeably misplaced. He wasn't rationally. Leo was a participant in an elite, competitive coding workshop, utilizing the library's new high-tech wing. He was reserved, academically gifted, and wore delicate, wire-rimmed glasses currently hooked onto the neckline of his simple, faded gray sweatshirt. 20 minutes earlier, he'd messaged his father, "Workshop finished. Ready when you are." Robert, his father, had responded almost instantly, "Just wrapping up dinner. 30 minutes max stay under the light." So Leo diligently obeyed, deeply engrossed in a complex Python programming problem on his phone, bathed in the harsh, pure white glare of the overhead lamp post. He was so intensely focused on the algorithm that the patrol cruiser was virtually silent until it coasted to a deliberate, grinding halt directly in front of him. A blinding spotlight, focused and painful, snapped on, striking him like a physical impact, welding him visually to the library's rough brick wall. He instinctively raised a hand to shield his eyes, blinking hard against the sudden assault. "Good evening, officers," he managed, his voice slightly tight but unfailingly polite. The driver's door swung open. Officer Mitch Dugan emerged. Dugan was a man nearing 50, characterized by a thick, powerful neck and a face that seemed perpetually set in a cynical snarl of inherent mistrust. He had policed Beacon Heights for 2 decades, viewing its flawless streets not as a public resource but as his own tightly controlled personal fiefdom. "What are you doing out here, son?" Dugan's inquiry was a low, guttural rumble, a tone calibrated specifically to establish dominance and instill immediate discomfort. "I'm just waiting for my father to pick me up, sir. I was inside at the coding workshop." Leo offered a vague gesture toward the library building, which was now entirely dark. The passenger door opened. Officer Keith Nolan slid out. Nolan was younger, thinner, exhibiting the twitchy, nervous energy of someone conditioned only to follow direction. His hand hovered constantly near his sidearm, not necessarily as a specific threat, but merely out of ingrained professional habit. "Workshop, huh?" Dugan scoffed, slowly closing the distance. He aimed his high-powered flashlight directly into Leo's already strained eyes. "The library's been locked up. Been closed for an hour. The workshop ran late, sir. We used the community entrance on the side." Leo remained rigidly still, making sure his hands rested plainly on his knees, fully visible. This was rote. He had rehearsed this scenario with his father countless times. Be courteous. Never make abrupt movements. Maintain respect, even when none is given in return. "Got any identification on you?" Dugan now stood directly over him, blocking the lamplight. Yes, sir. It's in my wallet, in my back pocket. Keep your hands precisely where I can see them. Dugan snapped, the sudden shift in volume startling. What's in the backpack? My laptop. My textbooks. You look a little keyed up, kid, Dugan observed, his eyes narrowing into suspicious slits. Waiting for a ride? Or perhaps waiting for a client? Leo's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. A client? Sir, I'm waiting for my father, Robert Harris. He should arrive any minute now. Dugan's sneer deepened into something colder. Robert Harris. Right. Get up. Hands on your head. Now, sir, I haven't committed any offense. Leo's response was polite, yes, but held an unmistakable undercurrent of firm refusal. To a man like Dugan, this quiet assertion of rights was perceived as a direct challenge. I said, stand up, Dugan bellowed. Leo complied slowly, his hands rising. Officer, I do not consent to a search. I am simply awaiting my transportation. Dugan let out a burst of harsh, ugly laughter. Oh, he doesn't consent. Did you hear that, Nolan? Mr. Hotshot here doesn't consent. He swung back toward Leo. You are loitering in my town, suspected of narcotics activity. That's all the consent this badge needs. That is untrue, Leo argued, his voice registering a slight quiver, yet his resolve remained intact. I am trying to get home. My phone is in my front pocket. I can call my father. You can speak to him. Your phone? Dugan spat the word out like foul waste. You children are all identical. Always convinced you can dial a number to make your problems disappear. Please, Leo pleaded, his composure finally starting to crack. He's close by. Dugan glanced dismissively at Nolan. Search him. Nolan took a tentative step forward, his face noticeably pale. Kid, just let us. I am not doing anything wrong, Leo insisted, his frustration finally boiling over, his voice rising sharply. This is harassment. Harassment? Dugan's already high temper combusted. He violently shoved Leo against the rough brick wall. Leo's head struck the mortar joint with a sharp impact, sending a blinding, hot flash of pain across his scalp. Hey, Mitch, ease up. Nolan started, his protest weak and thin. Shut up, Nolan. Dugan grabbed the thick front fabric of Leo's hoodie. You want to discuss harassment, you little punk? You're resisting. I'm not resisting, Leo cried out, desperately trying to twist away from the agonizing, vice-like grip. That was the precise justification Dugan had craved. He violently spun Leo around and slammed him face-first down onto the abrasive pavement. Leo's wire-rimmed glasses skipped across the concrete and vanished into the darkness. Stop moving, Dugan roared, pulling his ASP collapsible baton. I'm not moving. You're hurting me. I'll show you hurting. Dugan brought the baton down hard, targeting not the boy's spine, but the thick muscle of his thigh. A devastating, non-lethal strike that sent a pure shockwave of blinding agony rocketing through Leo's entire body. Leo screamed. A sharp, high sound of pure pain. Mitch! Nolan yelled, this time injecting true force into the cry. He's resisting. His hands are behind his back. Dugan shouted back, his face a terrifying crimson mask, completely lost in his own unchecked fury. He cinched the cuffs tightly, the sharp metal biting painfully into Leo's delicate wrists. Then, as a final, gratuitous measure of dominance, he placed his heavy boot on the back of Leo's neck, grinding his face into the rough sidewalk grit. Now, Dugan hissed, breathing raggedly. Are you going to be respectful? Leo could only gasp, struggling desperately just to draw air. From the patrol car's radio, a standard check-in transmission crackled to life. Nolan, visibly trembling, managed the reply. 10-4. We're 10-15 with a subject. Dugan violently hauled Leo to his feet. Leo's lip was already split and bleeding, and the area around his eye was rapidly beginning to balloon. He shoved the boy toward the car. You're going to the station, kid. We'll figure out what you're really doing out here. Leo stumbled badly, his injured leg giving way under his weight. Dugan shoved him again, forcing him to collapse roughly into the rear seat. The door slammed shut, instantly plunging him into heavy darkness. As the cruiser pulled away from the curb, Leo glimpsed his phone still lying innocently on the sidewalk, its screen fractured, just outside the radius of the street lamp's light. Seconds later, the screen flickered to life. The caller ID read, "Dad." The short drive to the Beacon Heights station lasted 5 minutes of excruciating, charged silence, broken only by Leo's quiet, ragged breathing from the back seat. Officer Nolan kept stealing worried glances in the rearview mirror, his face a miserable portrait of mounting anxiety. Officer Dugan, conversely, was whistling, a discordant, cheerful tune that caused Nolan's stomach to painfully clench. "You really gave him the business, Mitch," Nolan commented weakly, as they entered the secure Sally port. "Kid had an attitude," Dugan replied, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Do you think I'm going to allow some punk to mouth off to me? You have to instill respect in them, Nolan. That's lesson 1. He said he was waiting for his father," Nolan murmured. "Yeah, and I'm the Easter Bunny. He was either a scout or moving product. I bet you $50 we find a stash in that bag." They dragged Leo from the car and marched him into the processing area. The desk sergeant, a heavy-set woman named Peters with profoundly weary eyes, didn't even bother to look up from her paperback magazine. "What's the haul, Dugan?" "Public intoxication, loitering, resisting arrest, and suspicion of possession." Dugan tossed Leo's backpack onto the counter with a heavy thud. "Search that. I'm going to put Mr. Respectful in a nice holding cell." Dugan roughly shoved Leo into a small, concrete cage that reeked overwhelmingly of industrial bleach and existential hopelessness. The metal bench was frigid. Leo slid down onto the floor, pulling his arms tightly around his knees, desperately attempting to control the violent shaking that seized him. The adrenaline was rapidly receding, and the true, deep pain was settling in. His leg throbbed with white heat, his head pounded, and he could taste the metallic, rusty flavor of blood from his torn lip. In the other room, Sergeant Peters slowly unzipped Leo's backpack. She removed a sleek MacBook Pro, a dense, technical textbook titled Advanced Algorithms, and a half-eaten bag of gummy bears. She cast a long, cynical look at Nolan. "Suspicion of possession. Gummy bears." Nolan winced, his gaze dropping. "Mitch," he thought, "you pushed it too far." Dugan returned shortly. "Well, there is nothing in here, Mitch." Peter's voice was utterly flat. "Just school materials. Expensive school materials." Dugan's face hardened immediately. "So what? That doesn't absolve him from resisting. He was combative, right, Nolan?" Nolan swallowed hard, staring at the scuffed floor tiles. Yeah, sure, Mitch. He was definitely resisting. See?" Dugan slapped the counter triumphantly. "Book him. I'm writing the narrative now. Resisting arrest and assaulting an officer." "Assaulting?" Peters raised a skeptical eyebrow, finally looking up. "He looks like he was hit by a utility truck. You haven't got a single scratch on you." He kicked at me," Dugan lied smoothly, effortlessly. "Almost took out my knee. It's documented in the report. Nolan's my corroborating witness." Sergeant Peters sighed, a deep exhalation of resignation. She had witnessed this pattern countless times. Dugan was a walking, ticking time bomb of potential litigation, but he carried powerful insulation. His uncle held a highly influential position within the police union leadership. So, she followed protocol. She went to the cell, retrieved Leo, and initiated the formal booking process. Name, Leo Harris. His voice was hoarse and thin. Age, 17. Peters paused, looking up. He's a juvenile. Book him as an adult. Dugan called over from his desk, already typing furiously. 17's close enough. Mitch, I am required to notify his parents. He's legally a minor, Peters stated, her annoyance now palpable. Fine. Let him call his parents after the official report is filed. Dugan continued pecking at the keyboard with 2 fingers, meticulously fabricating a detailed narrative of a violently aggressive suspect who required immediate, overwhelming force to subdue. He alleged that Leo exhibited signs of being under the influence of an unknown narcotic and spoke incoherently. He falsely claimed Leo had lunged physically at Officer Nolan, necessitating Dugan's aggressive intervention. Nolan read the screen over Dugan's shoulder. Mitch, this isn't exactly how it happened. This is exactly how it happened, Dugan stated, his voice dropping to a low, menacing threat. This is the report. This is the official story. You got a problem with the story, Keith? Nolan glanced at Dugan's thick, scarred hands. He thought about the crushing weight of his monthly car payment, the pressure from his wife about finding a better neighborhood. He looked swiftly away. No, Mitch, that's what happened. An hour crawled by. Leo was back in the sterile cell. His body was a map of sharp, throbbing aches. He was consumed by terror, agonizing over the thought of his father frantically circling the library, wondering if his son had simply vanished. Finally, Sergeant Peters approached his bars. She held a single crack device, his phone, which a secondary patrol unit had recovered from the scene and plugged in behind the main desk. You get one opportunity to call, Peters said, her tone unexpectedly softer than before. She had processed the intake photo. The boy looked far more like a victim than a threat. Did you have a number memorized? Leo nodded mutely. He knew his father's direct line by heart. Peters used the precinct's old, beige landline phone to dial the number, then passed the heavy receiver to Leo through the reinforced bars. In the brightly lit squad room, Dugan and Nolan were sipping lukewarm, stale coffee, sharing loud laughter over a broadcast on the wall-mounted television. Dugan's self-serving report was filed and rubber-stamped. They believed they were completely in the clear. Yeah, who's he gonna call? Dugan announced loudly, ensuring the acoustics carried his mockery directly into Leo's cell. His mommy? His drug runner? He's probably trying to coordinate ditching the rest of the supply. Leo held the cold phone receiver to his ear, his hand trembling uncontrollably. It rang once, twice. Hello? The voice on the other end was deep, immediately sharp, and palpably laced with profound worry. Dad? Leo's voice broke violently, and a single, cleansing tear carved a straight, clean path through the blood and grime coating his cheek. Leo. Oh God, son. Where are you? I've been driving the area for over an hour. I was just about to contact the state police. I'm at the Beacon Heights precinct, Dad. I'm in a holding cell. There was a period of absolute, dead silence on the line. It lasted barely a second. But in that infinitesimal moment, Leo could physically feel the atmospheric pressure of the entire governmental structure of the state plummeting. Who placed you under arrest? Robert Harris's voice had fundamentally changed. It was now utterly, glacially calm. It was the precise, devastating voice he reserved exclusively for hostile cross-examinations in the highest courtrooms. It was the voice that had systematically dismantled the careers of corrupt senators and the most aggressive corporate defense lawyers. It was the cold, precision scalpel of a voice. Officers Dugan and Nolan, Leo managed to whisper. Did they injure you, Leo? Yes, Dad. They did. They beat me. Another pause. The air around the precinct crackled with unseen voltage. All right, son. I am currently en route. Do not utter one single additional word to anyone. Not one word. Do you understand my instruction? Yes, Dad. I love you. I'm coming. The line clicked dead. Leo carefully handed the receiver back to Peters, who was now staring at him with a profoundly unnerved expression. Everything. All right? Leo simply nodded. Peters returned slowly to her desk. Dugan, assuming the call was to the boy's mother seeking bail money, never looked up. Peters sat down. On a sudden, cold premonition, she typed the surname Harris into the secured state directory database. Her blood turned instantly to ice. She slowly swiveled in her chair, facing the squad room. Mitch? What? The kid you just beat and falsely booked for resisting arrest. What about him? His name is Leo Harris. His father is Robert Harris. Dugan stared blankly. So? I don't care if his old man is the local dog catcher. Nolan, who obsessively followed state politics, suddenly turned a terrifying shade of white. He looked genuinely nauseous. Mitch? Oh no, Mitch. Robert Harris. The Robert Harris. Dugan frowned, utterly confused. What in God's name are you talking about? Nolan shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the concrete floor. Mitch, you absolute idiot. Robert Harris is the state attorney general. Dugan's ingrained smirk froze solid, then instantly shattered. All color drained completely from his face, leaving him chalky white. He looked frantically at Peters. She was already dialing her commander's direct line. Yes, Captain Shaw. I believe you need to report in right now. Dugan and Nolan, they've made a serious, very serious mistake. The drive from the Beacon Heights Library to the precinct, a distance Robert Harris covered in a reckless 7 minutes, felt like an endless procession through liquid time. He was not the Attorney General in that moment. He was simply a father. His mind was a continuous, horrifying loop of one single, quiet phrase. Yes, Dad. They did. They beat me. His hands gripped the steering wheel of his sleek black Audi, the knuckles bone-white with suppressed fury. He was inherently not a man prone to explosive displays of emotion. His entire illustrious career was meticulously constructed upon a foundation of flawless, icy logic and impenetrable, unshakable calm. But beneath that polished, freezing surface, a volcano of paternal retribution was beginning to simmer. He visualized his son. His quiet, exceptionally brilliant son who actively avoided conflict, who preferred solving a complex puzzle to engaging in any kind of fight, being brutally assaulted. When he pulled into the precinct parking lot, he didn't seek a visitor space. He drove deliberately into the fire lane directly outside the main entrance, killed the high beams, and left the engine idling, the car a dark, potent sentinel. He strode through the front doors. The lobby was deserted, save for a single, snoring drunk slumped in the corner. Desk Sergeant Peters saw him approaching. She instantly recognized him from countless news features. He was taller, more physically imposing in person, and he radiated an almost visible field of authority that had absolutely nothing to do with the expensive, deceptively simple civilian clothing he wore. A dark blue polo shirt and gray slacks, remnants of the fundraising dinner he'd just left. I am here for my son, Robert announced. His voice was not pitched high. It was a low-frequency, seismic rumble that the entire structure of the building seemed to register. Sir, you will have to, Peters began, her voice stuttering badly under the force of his relentless gaze. My son, Leo Harris. He is a minor currently in your custody. I am his father, Robert Harris. You have precisely 2 minutes to produce him. He's in processing, sir. He was placed under arrest. On what charges? Resisting arrest, sir, and assaulting an officer. Robert Harris simply stared at her. He did not blink. He just stared. And in the terrifying vacuum of that stare, Sergeant Peters clearly envisioned her entire distinguished career, her comfortable pension, and even her personal liberty hanging precariously by a rapidly fraying thread. Sir, I need to contact the captain. You will produce my son. The door to the squad room burst open. Captain Shaw, a man clearly dragged from his sleep, his hair wildly uncombed and his uniform shirt sloppily tucked in, rushed out, attempting damage control. Mr. Harris, this is a terrible misunderstanding. I'm Captain Shaw. I'm just getting to the bottom of this situation. Robert deliberately turned his head to fully face Shaw. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Shaw stopped talking mid-sentence. Where is my son? We're retrieving him. We are getting him immediately, right now. Shaw spun frantically toward Peters. Get him out here now. And get Dugan and Nolan into my office this second. Peters fumbled for her keys and hurried toward the holding cells. Shaw turned back to Robert, attempting a practiced politician's reassuring smile. It landed somewhere closer to a terrified grimace. Sir, I am profoundly sorry for this mix-up. My officers, it's a difficult area. Things can become heated. This is Beacon Heights. Captain, Robert stated, his voice dropping to a dangerously soft volume. It is consistently ranked as one of the safest zip codes in the state. And my son was waiting outside the public library. You can immediately cease the difficult neighborhood defense. Before Shaw could stammer out another pathetic excuse, the cell door lock buzzed. Leo emerged, accompanied by Peter's. Robert's formidable icy composure almost fractured instantly. Leo's left eye was terribly swollen shut, blooming purple and black. His lip was split wide open, caked with dried blood. His gray hoodie was ripped. He was visibly limping, favoring his left leg, and angry, raw friction burns marked his face and wrists where he had been ground against the sidewalk. He looked at his father, and the fragile facade of teenage stoicism completely crumbled. "Dad." Robert crossed the room in 2 long, purposeful strides. He placed his hands firmly on Leo's shoulders, then very gently touched the side of his son's face, his thumb grazing the agonizingly swollen cheekbone. He did not ask, "Are you all right?" That question was now an absurdity. He simply looked at Leo, absorbing the full extent of the damage. Then he looked at Captain Shaw. The look he transmitted to the captain was not raw fury. It was a terrifying gaze of cold, professional scrutiny, like a meticulous pathologist studying a specimen he was preparing to thoroughly dissect. "Captain Shaw," Robert said, his voice a flat, dead, terrifying monotone. "These charges are immediately being dropped. My son is leaving with me. You will furnish, within the hour, full copies of all preliminary reports, all precinct audio logs, and all body camera footage from both arresting officers. My son will be transported directly to Beacon Heights General for a comprehensive medical evaluation, which will be formally submitted as evidence." "Evidence?" Shaw sputtered, the word catching in his throat. "Mr. Harris, Robert, this was just a simple mistake. Your officers," Robert interrupted, slicing through the excuse, "are named Dugan and Nolan. I want them confined to a room immediately. They are forbidden from speaking to each other. They are forbidden from speaking to their union representative. They are forbidden from leaving this building." "Now, hold on a second," Shaw blustered, trying desperately to reclaim some vestige of authority. "I cannot legally do that. They have rights. They just made an arrest." Robert Harris took a short half-step closer. He was 6 inches taller and vastly more powerful than Shaw. "Captain, you are currently harboring 2 men who kidnapped and brutally assaulted a minor. That is both a state and a federal felony. You are now actively attempting to obstruct a state investigation by denying me immediate access to evidence and allowing your officers the opportunity to coordinate their manufactured stories. That makes you an accessory." He pulled out his phone. He did not dial 911. He dialed his chief of staff. "Paul, it's me. I need you to dispatch 3 separate teams from the State Investigation Unit. Destination: Beacon Heights Police Department. I want a full forensics team, a data recovery team for all server and video records, and I want an investigative counsel. Their mandate is to secure this entire precinct." "Yes, secure it. No one is permitted to leave. No data is to be erased. I want every hard drive, every issued phone, and every logbook seized. I am formally declaring this entire building a state-managed crime scene. I'll be here." He terminated the call. Captain Shaw's face was the colorless gray of fresh ash. He had just witnessed his entire department, his entire career, summarily annexed by the state's highest-ranking law enforcement officer. You can't legally do that," Shaw whispered. "I just did," Robert confirmed. He gently placed his arm around his son's shoulders. "Let's go, Leo. We're going to the emergency room." As they moved toward the front door, Officer Mitch Dugan and Officer Keith Nolan emerged tentatively from the squad room, their faces uniformly pale and terrified. Dugan, spotting his opportunity, attempted a final, desperate appeal to Robert. Sir, I'm Officer Dugan. Your son. He was extremely aggressive. He resisted aggressively. We had absolutely no choice." Robert Harris stopped abruptly. He did not look at Dugan. He looked only at his son. "Leo, is this the man who struck you?" Leo, leaning heavily into the solid support of his father, merely nodded once, his eyes fixed resolutely on the floor. Robert slowly turned his head and finally looked at Dugan. Dugan's desperate plea snapped shut, soundlessly. Shut. He had never been looked at with such cold finality. It was the gaze of a man who saw not a person, but an impediment to be contained, as if Leo were already confined within a coffin. Officer Dugan, Robert articulated, his voice possessing a terrifying, surgical calm. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start exercising that right immediately. He firmly escorted Leo out the front entrance, past the building's faded brick and straight into the pulsing, strobing red and blue tableau of the newly arrived State Investigation Unit vehicles flooding the parking lot. The next 6 hours unfolded in a relentless, systematic display of cold efficiency that completely overwhelmed the small-town precinct. While Leo was taken to a secure section of the county hospital, where he was photographed, x-rayed, and meticulously treated by a specialized forensics nurse who cataloged the exact location, dimension, and hue of every single bruise and abrasion, the Beacon Heights Police Department was being quietly, professionally, and ruthlessly dismantled. Robert Harris did not remain at the hospital. He entrusted Leo to his chief of staff and a seasoned victim's advocate, then immediately returned to the precinct. He was no longer merely a concerned father. He was the Attorney General, and the threat, the man who had hurt his son, was now neutralized, locked away for the moment. Harris established a temporary command post in Captain Shaw's own spacious, corner office, a room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and unaddressed paperwork. Shaw himself was sitting miserably in a guest chair in the periphery, having been invited to stay and observe the operation. He looked utterly defeated, like an unfortunate homeowner forced to witness the foreclosure and inventory of his life's assets. "Where are we on the video evidence?" Robert asked Jessica Sloan, the deputy AG whom he had called in late that night to spearhead the on-site investigation. Sloan was known throughout the state as a brilliant, no-nonsense prosecutor who specialized in public integrity and rooting out corruption in high places. "We have Officer Nolan's body cam footage," Sloan reported, expertly tapping the screen of her ruggedized field tablet. "It's currently downloading and verifying the chain of custody." Officer Duggins, however, presents a hurdle. "A hurdle? How so?" Harris inquired, already anticipating the predictable bureaucratic evasion. "He claims it malfunctioned," Sloan stated flatly. "He asserts that the unit was damaged during the struggle when the suspect, that is, when Leo allegedly assaulted him. And conveniently, the unit's memory card is completely corrupted." Robert Harris almost permitted himself a slow, chilling smile, the satisfied, predatory smile of someone who knew exactly how the game was played. "Corrupted? Of course it is. And his report? Filed at 10:14 p.m. Sloan replied, glancing at her notes. "It is, frankly, a work of complete fiction. Claims Leo was combative and incoherent, showed classic signs of narcotic use, and struck Officer Dugan squarely in the chest. Officer Nolan co-signed it. And where are these two model officers now? In separate interrogation rooms. Dugan is currently locked down with his union representative, reciting the predictable fear for my life narrative. Nolan is alone. He requested an attorney, but he looks absolutely terrified. He is the weak link, Robert." "Good," Robert affirmed, pushing himself up from the borrowed desk. "Let's go break him. You, me, and the video evidence." Meanwhile, Officer Keith Nolan was marooned in a small, gray, acoustically tiled room without a window, staring down at his trembling hands. His entire life was flickering rapidly through his mind, a reel of dashed hopes and terrible decisions. He had genuinely wanted to wear the badge to serve and to help people. Instead, he had devolved into Mitch Dugan's pathetic, obedient yes-man. And now, at this terrible juncture, he had co-signed a report that was a demonstrable, malicious lie, a criminal act involving a felony, perjury, and obstruction of justice. The heavy door opened, and Robert Harris strode in, followed closely by Jessica Sloan. Nolan instinctively shot to his feet, eyes wide with anxiety. "Mr. Nolan," Robert said, his tone deliberately casual, disarming. "Please sit." Nolan dropped back into the uncomfortable chair. "We have a significant problem, Keith," Sloan began, sliding open a heavy manila file binder. "We have a police report here, signed by you, which asserts that a 17-year-old boy assaulted two armed, adult police officers. A report that directly contributed to that boy being badly beaten, illegally cuffed, and falsely imprisoned. It was Mitch. The kid was resisting. Nolan stammered, his voice tight with desperation. "Stop," Robert commanded, holding up a single, authoritative hand. Nolan's panicked mouth snapped shut instantly. "Do not lie to me, Officer Nolan. Do not ever, under any circumstances, lie to the office of the Attorney General. It will not end well for you." Sloan placed a slim laptop onto the steel table and rotated the screen so it faced Nolan. "This is your body camera footage, Officer Nolan. It seems yours was less prone to malfunction than Officer Duggan's unit. Let's watch it together." She hit the play button. The video quality was startlingly clear. The audio was pristine. Asterisk. "I'm just waiting for my dad to pick me up." Asterisk, "Sir, stand up. Hands on your head. Now." Asterisk, "Sir, I don't consent to a search." Asterisk. "Oh, you don't consent? You hear that, Nolan?" Nolan watched his video self just stand there, paralyzed. He watched Dugan suddenly, violently shove Leo against the wall. He watched his partner slam the boy face first onto the hard concrete. He heard his own weak, pathetic protest from the footage. Asterisk. "Hey, Mitch, take it easy." Asterisk, and then came the part that made his stomach churn. The moment Dugan drew his expandable baton. Asterisk. "I'll show you hurting." Asterisk, the awful, sickening fact of the baton impacting flesh and bone. Leo's high-pitched, agonized scream. Then, Nolan's own reflexive, desperate lie being recorded. Asterisk, Mitch Duggins. "He's resisting." The camera view showed Leo on the ground, his hands clearly visible, not struggling at all, just curled up attempting to shield his head and body. And then it showed Dugan's heavy-duty boot grinding down onto the boy's neck. Sloan paused the video. The room became deathly quiet, the silence broken only by Nolan's shallow, panicked breathing. Nolan himself was a ghostly, pale green color. "You signed a report?" Sloan said, her voice cutting and sharp like a surgeon's scalpel. "That claims this child assaulted you. I am currently looking at video evidence, captured by your own official camera, that shows your partner committing felony aggravated assault. It shows you doing absolutely nothing to intervene or stop it. And then, it shows you compounding his crime by co-signing his brazen lie. That is a minimum sentence of 5 years in state prison, Mr. Nolan," Robert Harris added, his voice returning to that chillingly conversational register. "Obstruction of justice, perjury, accessory to felony assault, conspiracy to commit a crime. You will lose your job, obviously. You will forfeit your entire pension. You will become a convicted felon. Your partner, Dugan, is right now in the next room feeding his union representative a self-serving narrative that completely throws you under the bus. He's claiming you were the one who told him the kid was acting squirrely. He's saying you escalated the situation." "What?" Nolan looked up, panic spiking in his chest. "That's not true. He's the one who—" "He's been on the force for 2 decades, Keith," Sloan interjected, leaning in until her face was close to his. "You've been on for 3 years. Who do you honestly think they are going to believe? His uncle is the regional union brass. You are nobody. You are the designated fall guy." Nolan began to hyperventilate. He could feel the steel jaws of the trap snapping shut around him. "Or," Robert Harris stated, his voice softening just a fraction, "there is another path available to you." Nolan looked at the Attorney General, his eyes wide and desperate. "You tell the absolute truth," Robert said simply. "Right now, you give us a full, signed, voluntary statement. You testify under oath at the grand jury. You testify at the upcoming trial. You admit you failed to intervene when a felony occurred. You admit you signed a false report under coercion and duress from a superior officer. You do all of that, and we will take the conspiracy and obstruction charges entirely off the table. You will still be fired. You will never, ever be a police officer again, but you just might stay out of prison." Sloan decisively pushed a blank sheet of legal paper and a pen across the table. "Mitch, he'll kill me?" Nolan whispered, shaking his head. "Mitch Dugan is rapidly becoming the least of your concerns right now," Robert said, standing up, towering over him. "I am. You have precisely 5 minutes to decide if you want to be known as a co-defendant or if you want to become my star witness. Robert and Sloane exited the room, leaving Nolan alone in the silence. Nolan stared intently at the blank paper. He thought about Dugan, the constant bullying, the violent temper, the threats. Then he thought about the video, about Leo's scream, and about the sheer, suffocating finality of prison time. He slowly picked up the pen. When Sloane re-entered 5 minutes later on the dot, Keith Nolan was writing furiously. Across the hall, Mitch Dugan was slouched back confidently in his chair, arms aggressively crossed over his chest, his union representative hovering protectively at his side. "I have nothing further to say," Dugan declared, a defiant sneer fixed on his face. "We were in fear of our lives. The suspect was non-compliant. We used standard, department-approved techniques to subdue him." The door opened. Sloane walked in, closing the door quietly behind her. "Mr. Dugan, your representative is free to advise you, but as of right now," she checked the expensive, precise timepiece on her wrist, 10:02 a.m. "This is no longer simply an internal affairs matter." She paused, clearing her throat slightly. "Officer Mitch Dugan, you are officially under arrest for aggravated assault, filing a false police report, and 3 distinct counts of deprivation of civil rights under color of law." Dugan's smug smirk vanished completely. "You're kidding me." 2 tall, formidable state investigators, who were definitely not local cops, moved silently and purposefully in behind Sloane. "Stand up, sir. Hands behind your back. You can't arrest me," Dugan bellowed, his face immediately turning an alarming shade of purple. "I'm the victim here. That kid assaulted me. That's a defense you are welcome to try out in court, officer," Sloane responded, maintaining her impassive control. "Right now, you are a defendant. And as for your partner, Officer Nolan, he is in the next room giving a full, voluntary confession. He happens to be our very first witness." The blood seemed to physically drain from Dugan's face. The bravado, the ingrained arrogance, the sense of untouchable power, all of it evaporated in that single terrible instant. He was suddenly and painfully reduced to just a common garden-variety bully who had finally made the catastrophic mistake of punching someone who could punch back with institutional power. You, that rat," he stammered in disbelief as the state officers quickly fastened the cold steel handcuffs around his wrists. "Take him to the state holding cell," Sloane ordered the investigators. "And Captain Shaw," she added, looking over the hall to the former chief. "The Attorney General would like to schedule an immediate discussion regarding your precinct's pattern and practice concerning report filing and training. He has several notes." The story exploded instantly. It became the lead item on every local and national news broadcast within hours. Attorney General's son viciously beaten by police. 2 cops arrested. The Beacon Heights Police Department entered an immediate state of freefall. Captain Shaw was suspended immediately and then summarily fired after the AG's Comprehensive Office investigation uncovered a pervasive, systemic pattern of corrupted body camera videos, misplaced evidence, and intentionally lost civilian complaints, nearly all of which eventually traced back to Officer Dugan's activities. The police union attempted to mount a counterattack, releasing a carefully worded statement about the inherent dangers faced by officers and the egregious politicization of a routine arrest. But the resulting public narrative was overwhelming and completely uncontrollable. Robert Harris, in a meticulously calculated move designed to ensure maximum transparency and political impact, formally recused his office from the direct prosecution of Dugan to avoid any conflict of interest claims. He held a somber, televised press conference outside the state capitol building. "My son is a victim," he stated, his voice unwavering, his eyes methodically scanning the overwhelming bank of news cameras aimed at him. "He is, tragically, one of many victims. The only difference between my son and so many others who suffer this abuse is that I happen to possess the immediate power and the institutional authority to make the appropriate phone call after the beating occurred. Most people do not. This criminal prosecution will be handled exclusively by an independent special prosecutor, Jessica Sloane, who," he paused, clearing his throat for emphasis, "has my full and unqualified confidence. My office, however," he continued, letting the gravity of his words settle on the reporters. We'll be handling a separate, parallel investigation. A rigorous pattern and practice investigation into the Beacon Heights Police Department, from the top down. We will use every resource available to find out precisely how a man like Mitch Dugan was allowed to wear a badge for 20 years, and we will ruthlessly excise this cancer from the community. It was an undeniable declaration of war against systemic police corruption. For Leo, the recovery process proved agonizingly slow. His ribs were deeply bruised. His leg suffered from a painful bone contusion that left him with a noticeable limp for weeks. And the hematoma around his eye took what felt like an eternity to return to its normal color. But the emotional and psychological scars were far deeper and more insidious. He became withdrawn, acutely nervous around new people, and he completely stopped going out after dark, fearing the shadows and the unexpected presence of authority. He and his father finally talked, truly talked, for the first time in what seemed like years, not in the strained dynamic of an authority figure and his subordinate son, but as two black men forced to confront the harsh, dangerous realities of living in America. The criminal case against Dugan was officially set for trial. His defense team, heavily financed and provided by the police union, was aggressive and completely unapologetic. Their strategy was crudely clear. Paint Leo as an entitled, arrogant, privileged rich kid who harbored a visceral hatred for the police. They were also going to portray Robert Harris as a power-hungry, vindictive tyrant using the immense resources of the state to personally avenge his family. They filed motion after spurious motion attempting to have the case summarily thrown out. They tried desperately to have Nolan's devastating testimony ruled inadmissible, claiming he had been coerced, intimidated, and manipulated by the Attorney General's office. The presiding judge, a highly respected, no-nonsense jurist named Judge Patel, denied every single filing. The coercion counsel, she stated dryly during one hearing, appears to be the video evidence of his partner committing a felony crime. The testimony stands. We will proceed to trial in 6 weeks. Dugan was offered a final, generous plea deal. Plead guilty to aggravated assault, and the federal civil rights charges would be dropped. The recommended sentence was 10 years, eligible for parole in 5. Dugan, his arrogance intact to the very last, contemptuously refused the offer. "I'm not pleading to anything," he sneered at his lawyer. "I did my job. That kid is a liar. I'll see him in court." Nolan, on the other hand, accepted his deal immediately. He formally pled guilty to 1 count of malfeasance in office and 1 count of signing a false report, both serious felonies. In exchange for his full, complete, and truthful testimony against Dugan, Sloan agreed to recommend 0 prison time, settling instead for 5 years of probation and a permanent, non-negotiable surrender of his police certification. His career was over. His life as he knew it was utterly ruined. But he would walk away a convicted felon, yet a free man. The day of the trial finally arrived. The courtroom was absolutely packed, the air electric with anticipation. Dugan sat emotionless at the defense table, trying hard to look bored and unjustly persecuted. Robert Harris occupied a seat in the front row, positioned directly behind Jessica Sloan. He wasn't there as the Attorney General. He was simply a father supporting his son. Leo was the prosecution's first witness. He walked slowly to the stand, his residual limp barely discernible now. He looked small and vulnerable in the imposing witness box. "Mr. Harris," Sloan began, her voice deliberately gentle and measured, "please tell the court, in your own words, exactly what happened on the night of October 12th. Leo recounted the horrific story simply, clearly, and without any unnecessary dramatization. He didn't embellish the facts. He didn't break down or cry. He simply stated the facts. He was waiting for a ride. They profiled him. They questioned him aggressively. He calmly asserted his constitutional rights. They became enraged. Then came the defense's cross-examination. Dugan's lawyer, a notoriously aggressive shark named Harrison, rose slowly to his feet. "Mr. Harris, you reside in the Governor's Heights neighborhood, correct?" Harrison's voice was slick, insinuating. "One of the wealthiest, most exclusive enclaves in this state." "Yes," Leo confirmed. And your father is the Attorney General of the state. Yes. So, you are accustomed to getting your way, aren't you, Mr. Harris? You are very used to having power and authority defer to you. Objection. Sloane instantly called out, rising halfway from her seat. Sustained, Judge Patel snapped. Get to the legal point, Mr. Harrison. The point, Your Honor, is that my client, a 20-year veteran officer, was dealing with a non-compliant, arrogant young man who thought he was above the law. Isn't it true, Mr. Harris, that you flatly refused to show the officer your identification? No, sir. I offered to show it. He told me to keep my hands where he could see them, and then told Officer Nolan to search me. And you refused the search, Harrison pressed, a theatrical pause before his next loaded question. You, who were loitering alone in the dark in a high-crime area. Objection. Sloane barked. Beacon Heights is demonstrably not a high-crime area. Sustained. Mr. Harris, you simply refused a lawful order. Didn't you? I told him I didn't consent to a search, sir, Leo replied, his voice calm but firm. I hadn't done anything wrong. So you decided to school these experienced officers on constitutional law, didn't you? You, the Attorney General's privileged son, thought you knew better than them. I was just trying to call my dad, Leo said quietly, looking down briefly. And when they attempted to detain you, you resisted, didn't you? You thrashed violently. You kicked Officer Dugan. Harrison leaned in, anticipating the denial. No, sir, Leo said, his eyes lifting to meet the jury's gaze directly. He shoved me into the wall, then he threw me on the ground. I didn't resist. I just screamed after he hit me with the baton. Harrison had no immediate, credible rebuttal for that simple, painful truth. No further questions for this witness. The prosecution's second witness was Keith Nolan. He walked to the stand wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit, looking utterly spectral, like a man already haunted. He conspicuously refused to look anywhere near Dugan. Sloane started, Officer Nolan, please look at the defendant. Do you recognize him? Nolan looked over at Dugan. His voice was barely a whisper. Yes, that's Mitch Dugan. And what exactly did you and Officer Dugan do on the night of October 12th? Sloane asked, her voice gentle, almost inviting. Nolan broke. The dam of his stored fear, guilt, and regret burst completely. He looked directly at the jury, hot tears suddenly streaming down his face. He beat that kid for absolutely no reason, Nolan choked out. For nothing. He just got angry, and he beat him. And I just stood there. I didn't stop him. And the report you signed? Sloane pressed softly. It was a lie. Every single word of it was a lie. I was terrified of him. He told me I had to sign it, so I did. But it was a lie. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Dugan was staring at Nolan from the defense table, his eyes burning with palpable, murderous hatred. And the body camera evidence? Sloane continued. Mitch, he told me that his had malfunctioned on the ride back to the station. He winked at me. He told me mine better have malfunctioned, too. But I couldn't destroy the evidence. I was too scared. Thank you, Officer Nolan. No further questions. Dugan's lawyer immediately launched into cross-examination, attempting to discredit him. You are, Harrison began, clearing his throat loudly, a documented liar. You are a convicted felon. You are only testifying to save your own skin from prison time. Yes, Nolan said, weeping openly and miserably. I am all of those things, but I am not lying now. The trial was now well into its third day. The momentum was entirely with the prosecution. Keith Nolan's emotional testimony had been devastating, and the defense was clearly on the ropes, their only remaining strategy being the crude character assassination of the victim and the credibility attack on the turncoat cop. But Jessica Sloane had one final, undeniable piece of evidence to deliver, the ultimate nail in the coffin. Your Honor, Sloane addressed the court, her voice resonating with authority. The prosecution now calls its final piece of evidence. We would like permission to play for the court and the jury the unedited body camera footage from former Officer Keith Nolan's device, already marked as Exhibit A. The lights in the packed courtroom slowly dimmed. A large monitor, which had been strategically positioned facing the judge and the jury, was rotated into view. Dugan's lawyer had fought desperately to keep the video out, claiming it was inflammatory and unfairly prejudicial. Judge Patel had definitively overruled him. "It is not prejudicial, counsel," she had said sternly. "It is unvarnished evidence." The courtroom settled into an absolute, anxious silence. The low hum of the projector was the only sound audible. Robert Harris leaned forward from his seat, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white bone. Leo, sitting right beside him, could not bear to watch. He closed his eyes and quietly leaned his head against his father's shoulder. The video started. The time and date stamp glowed clearly in the corner. The jury watched the quiet, ordinary street scene. They heard Leo's polite, clear voice. Evening, officers. They saw Dugan. His face twisted into an aggressive, menacing sneer, shining the blinding flashlight beam directly into Leo's eyes. They heard the loaded questions. You waiting for a ride or you waiting for a client? Several jurors frowned visibly. They lived in Beacon Heights, and they knew exactly the ugly implication of that question. Then they heard Leo's calm, constitutional assertion of his rights. Sir, I don't consent to a search. I'm just waiting for my ride. Dugan's lawyer, in his opening statement, had painted this moment as belligerent and uncooperative, but the jury saw the video reality. Leo wasn't belligerent. He was firm, scared, but attempting to follow the law. Then they saw the moment of sudden, brutal escalation. Dugan's large hands slamming onto Leo's chest, the hard shove that sent him against the brick wall, the horrific sound of Leo's head hitting the masonry. Several jurors gasped audibly. Hey Mitch, take it easy. Nolan's weak voice. Shut up, Nolan. Dugan's furious roar. The video footage was shaky as Nolan shifted position, but it captured everything that followed. It captured Dugan spinning Leo around and slamming him face first onto the concrete sidewalk. And then the baton, the awful, sickening, wet thack of the dense polymer striking human flesh and bone. Leo's high-pitched, agonizing scream filled the silent room. In the gallery, a woman began to sob uncontrollably. In the jury box, one juror, a middle-aged man, slowly removed his glasses and wiped his watering eyes. Another, a young woman, held her hand over her mouth, her face a mask of utter horror. They watched, transfixed, as Dugan placed his heavy boot on the 17-year-old's neck. They heard his cruel taunt. Now, are you going to be respectful? Mitch Dugan, at the defense table, stared at the screen as if mesmerized. His mask of artificial boredom was completely gone. Sweat beaded on his forehead and upper lip. He looked, for the first time since his arrest, like a desperate, cornered animal. The video continued, showing the ride back to the station. The audio captured Dugan and Nolan's conversation clearly in the front seat. Kid had an attitude. You got to teach them respect, Nolan. It showed them walking into the precinct. It showed Dugan carelessly tossing the evidence bag onto the counter. Book him. I'm writing the report. Resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. Assaulting? He looks like he got hit by a truck. The desk sergeant's voice was heard asking. He kicked at me. It's all in the report. Nolan's my witness. Sloan stopped the video. The lights slowly came up. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Heavy, suffocating, undeniable. Every single eye in the room was fixed upon Mitch Dugan. The prosecution rests, Your Honor, Sloan stated, her voice echoing the finality in the still, charged room. Dugan's lawyer stood up. He looked visibly shaken, his earlier swagger completely gone. The defense calls Mitch Dugan to the stand. It was a catastrophic, desperate mistake. A legal Hail Mary pass. But Dugan had vehemently insisted. He was convinced he was the only one who could possibly fix this disaster. He walked to the witness stand, swore the oath, and sat down. His lawyer led him quickly through his rehearsed, defensive story. I feared for my life. He was non-compliant. The neighborhood is known for drug activity. I saw a bulge. I thought he was reaching for a weapon. I used my training. Then it was Sloane's turn. She walked slowly, methodically, toward the witness box, a quiet predator. Officer Dugan, you testified under oath that you feared for your life. At what specific point did that fear arise? When Mr. Harris, became belligerent and refused my lawful orders. When he said, "I don't consent to a search." That and his aggressive posture. Aggressive posture. Sloane repeated, her tone dripping with disbelief. You are 6'2", 230 pounds of trained muscle. He is 5'10", 150 pounds, and he was sitting passively on a bench. But you were scared? I was cautious. So cautious that you violently shoved his head into a brick wall? I was controlling a non-compliant suspect. Let's discuss this bulge. You claimed you saw a bulge. You testified you thought it was a weapon. That's correct. I saw him reach for his pocket. What precisely was in his pocket, Officer Dugan? I don't know. You don't know? Sloane raised an eyebrow, an expression of utter contempt. After you beat him and arrested him, you failed to check to see if this weapon you supposedly feared for your life over was, in fact, a weapon? Dugan remained silent, trapped. Allow me to assist you, Sloane said, leaning closer. His smartphone was in his front pocket. His wallet was in his back pocket. The bulge you feared was a simple cellular device. Isn't that the truth? I didn't know that at the time, Dugan mumbled, trying to salvage his lie. And the baton? Sloane shifted gears, attacking his training. You are professionally trained on the use of force continuum. When is a baton strike to the leg explicitly authorized under department policy? When a suspect is physically resisting and cannot be subdued by other means of control. And was Leo Harris physically resisting when you struck him? Yes, he was kicking. He was thrashing. Officer Dugan, Sloane said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet somehow dominating the entire room. Dropping. We all just watched the video. Jessica Sloane's voice was dangerously quiet, cutting through the thick tension of the courtroom. Your partner's video. It showed Mr. Harris on the ground face down before you ever drew your baton. It showed him with his hands near his head, completely compliant, not resisting, not moving. And it showed you strike him in the head with unnecessary force. Your initial report was a calculated lie. Your testimony just now under oath is a continued, deliberate lie. The video is the truth. Dugan was already sweating heavily, his tie loosened, his eyes darting frantically. That video, it's not clear. It's shaky. He started shouting, his voice cracking with panic. You're twisting it. You're taking it out of context. I'm a good cop. I'm a hero. I've been decorated. He tried to inflate himself one last time with the hollow rhetoric of his career. Sloane just looked at him, her expression a mask of cold finality. She allowed his desperate, pathetic shouting to hang in the silent, condemning air of the courtroom, letting the jury absorb the sound of a bully losing control. Then she turned with deliberate slowness toward the 12 people who held Dugan's fate. No further questions, Your Honor. The closing arguments were essentially a formal acknowledgement of what the video had already proven. Dugan's lawyer tried, predictably and cynically, to blame the victim, suggesting Leo was insolent, provoking, or somehow deserving of the violence. But the silent, brutal reality captured on the shaky cell phone footage had already done its irreversible work, stripping away all plausible deniability. Jessica Sloane's closing was concise, powerful, and utterly uncompromising. She walked straight to the rail of the jury box, her gaze meeting theirs, one by one. What you saw on that video was not policing. It was a criminal assault, premeditated and executed with malice. It was the most profound and unforgivable abuse of power. Mitch Dugan did not see a 17-year-old high school student that night. He saw someone he thought didn't belong in his world. He saw someone he thought he could intimidate and bully. He saw someone he thought he could brutally beat and then simply lie about, protected by the thin blue line. And he would have gotten away with it. He would have ruined that boy's life forever. A false arrest, an invented charge of felony assault on an officer. That stigma, that black mark, would have followed Leo Harris through every college application, every job interview, forever denying him a future he deserved. Mitch Dugan would have returned to patrol the very next day, badge shining, ready to find his next victim. Why? Because Officer Keith Nolan was too much of a coward to stop him or report him. Because Captain Shaw was too insulated, too lazy, and too complicit to investigate him. The defense wants you to believe this is about a disrespectful kid who needed to be taught a lesson. This is not about respect. This is about the inviolable rule of law. And the man who broke it repeatedly, systematically, is sitting right over there, attempting to evade accountability. There is only one difference between this case and 1,000 other acts of police brutality that go unreported and unpunished every single day. This time, the victim's father happened to be the Attorney General. But the promise of justice should never depend on who your father is or the power of your connections. Your verdict today will send a definitive message not just to Mitch Dugan, but to every officer who thinks the badge is a shield for their rage, their prejudice, and their violence. Your verdict will say, clearly and loudly, not in this state, not anymore. The jury was out for a mere 45 minutes, a brutally short deliberation signaling a clear consensus. When they returned, the courtroom felt frozen. Dugan was smirking again, the arrogance resurfacing. He truly believed he had talked his way out of the charges, that his decorated status was bulletproof. The courtroom clerk stood. On the count of aggravated assault in the second degree, how do you find? Guilty. Dugan's smirk evaporated, freezing into a mask of shock and disbelief. On the count of filing a false police report, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of deprivation of civil rights under color of law, count 1. How do you find? Guilty. Count 2. Guilty. Count 3. Guilty. Guilty on all counts. The words reverberated with monumental weight. Robert Harris slowly put a hand on his son's back. A silent, heavy pressure of relief and acknowledgement. Leo let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding since the asphalt struck his face 6 months ago. Dugan, his face turning an alarming shade of purple, finally broke. He tried to lunge wildly at the jury box, screaming, "You're all crazy. I'm innocent. I'm a hero." He was instantly restrained by the bailiffs, his desperate shouts swallowed by the walls as he was dragged, kicking and cursing, from the courtroom. The sentencing hearing was held 2 weeks later. Judge Patel, stern and devoid of sympathy, looked down at Mitch Dugan, who was now stripped of his uniform and confined to a standard-issue orange prison jumpsuit. "Mr. Dugan, you took an oath to protect and serve. You willfully and maliciously violated that sacred oath. You shredded the public's trust, and you terrorized and brutalized a child who was utterly defenseless. You did not just fail your duty in a moment of panic. You acted as a calculated predator using the authority granted to you by the state. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to the maximum allowed under law. 10 years in the state penitentiary for the assault conviction, and 5 years for the civil rights violations, the sentences to be served concurrently. Considering the egregious nature of your crimes, you will be eligible for parole in no sooner than 7 years." The hard karma had struck, swift and relentless. Dugan, now subdued and pale, was led away in chains. But the consequences did not end with the primary offender. Keith Nolan, the partner who stood by and did nothing, received his sentence of 5 years probation. Though he avoided prison time, he lost his job immediately, the pension he had worked 2 decades for, and eventually his house. He was unable to find meaningful employment and worked in the end as a graveyard shift stalker at a sprawling warehouse. A convicted felon, invisible, disgraced, and haunted by his inaction. Captain Shaw's ruin was even more comprehensive. The AG's pattern and practice investigation quickly led to his indictment. He was found guilty of obstruction of justice and official malfeasance for systematically destroying and suppressing civilian complaints to protect officers like Dugan and shield the department from scrutiny. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, a testament to institutional rot. The Beacon Heights PD itself was deemed fundamentally broken. The Attorney General's office forced the department into a state-monitored consent decree, a legally binding order requiring radical reform. The entire command staff was summarily fired. New training standards focused on de-escalation, new independent oversight mechanisms, and a truly independent civilian review board were mandated, permanently altering how the department operated. Leo Harris, through immense courage and professional help, recovered fully. He graduated high school with high honors. The next fall, he didn't pursue his initial plan of coding. Instead, he enrolled in the pre-law program at Georgetown University. He had seen up close what the law looked like when it was brutally broken, and what it looked like when it was justly enforced. He had found his calling in the machinery of justice. A year later, Robert Harris stood with his son on the expansive, ivy-covered campus grounds. "You're absolutely sure about this path?" Robert asked, gesturing toward the monumental pillars of the law library. "It's a hard, often disappointing life, Leo." "I'm sure, Dad," Leo said, adjusting the frames of his glasses. "Someone's got to do the grinding work, and I want to make sure that next time the kid on the bench doesn't need his father to be the Attorney General to finally get justice." Robert smiled. A true, deep, proud smile that erased the last 6 months of tension. He put his arm around his son's shoulder, and they walked together into the future Leo was now intent on shaping. The story of Leo Harris and Mitch Dugan is a stark, terrifying reminder of a terrible, enduring truth, that justice is often not blind. It is a reminder that for every abuser in uniform who gets caught, there are thousands who continue their careers unimpeded. All because their victim didn't have a powerful father, a lucky break, or a friend with a phone ready to record. The system ultimately worked for Leo, but only because his father effectively was the system this time. Yet, the karma was real and it was devastatingly hard. Dugan's boundless arrogance, built over a 20-year career of bullying and impunity, was his final downfall. He finally picked on the one person he couldn't silence, intimidate, or simply lie away. What did you think of Dugan's maximum sentence? Was 10 years enough for the sheer abuse of power he demonstrated? What about Nolan's consequences? Did he deserve to lose everything for his silence? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you were moved by this powerful story of accountability, justice, and hard karma, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see the system brought to bear, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama where the powerful are finally held accountable.